Hi, it's Jan Howell here with another DIY sewing tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to make these nifty utility aprons. They are the best thing ever. Not only are they cute to wear, they're very functional. With the different size pockets, they're great to hold a pair of scissors, pens and pencils, your phone. I wear one every day going about the things I do around the home, out in the garden. They're just great to have those pockets. They have a nice contour design, which is really comfortable to wear. They're lined and wash up great. I'll be going over different types of fabrics that are good to use and what is not good to use. And make sure you watch the whole video because I'm going to show you not only how to make the ties to the aprons, but also how to apply a quick release buckle, which comes in really handy on these aprons. It's a fun sewing project and they make really fun gifts. So without any further ado, let's get started. To make the utility apron, let's go over the items and things that you'll need. You'll need the pattern printed, downloaded, and I will put the link to that in the description below. Straight pins, a pair of fabric scissors, a rotary cutter and ruler if you have one, and not necessary, but it does come in handy, an iron. You'll need a marking pen. I really like these erasable pens that disappear with heat, or you can just use a chalk or a pencil. If you want to make a quick release strap for your apron, you'll need the hardware for that. And this is just a 1-inch quick release strap that I'm just upcycling from some other random item that I kept for the hardware itself. And you'll need some tape for your pattern assembly. And of course you'll need your fabric. I'll go over all the details and some great recommendations in just a minute. Grab your pattern and let's put it together. There's just a little bit of assembly required. To put the pattern pieces together, we'll start by putting pages 5, 6, and 7 together, and then 8, 9, and 10. Set your pattern pieces aside and let's go over fabric options. So depending on what you're going to be using your apron for, pretty much any cotton fabric. If you are using the apron for like garden tools, like hand shovels, clippers, and things like that, you might want to use a more thicker fabric like canvas or even duck fabrics. This particular combination, I'm going to use this. This is corduroy. Corduroy makes up a really cute apron, gives it texture, and I love this gold color. I'm going to use that as my back piece, and the front pocket pieces, I'm going to use this black, and for the trim, I'll use this black gingham. So they're all cotton fabrics. This is a little bit thicker fabric than just your quilting fabric. You can use quilting, just regular quilting fabrics for the back of the apron, but for the front pieces, I would use something a little bit thicker. This is a color combination that I'm going to use. This is just a quilting fabric that I'm going to use to bind the pocket with. This is going to be my back piece, and my pocket piece will be this. And I'll probably use the back piece just with this cotton piece as well. And something really fun that you can do is upcycle a pair of jeans. And if you haven't watched my tutorial on that, some tips on getting your jeans ready to use as fabric, some tips on cutting things out and such. So I'm going to use this pair of jeans and this fabric for the pocket. So that, as you can see, there's a lot of different options. I have made my own bias tape that I will use to bind the pocket. If you haven't watched my video on how to make your own bias tape, that might be kind of fun for you to watch. It's something good to have. And look at the fun trim that I can use and just have it on hand for other projects. You can even use some upholstery fabrics. This is an upholstery fabric. It's not real thick and it will be pretty durable. And this is kind of a seersucker fabric, has a little bit of a texture to it. You can pretty much tell if a fabric's going to be durable or not by holding it in your hand. You know, you don't want to make an apron with something that's going to wear out quickly and fall apart. So there's just some options for fabric. So for this particular apron, I could use this same color for the front and the back of the apron, but where this is a little bit more bulky of a fabric, I'm just going to use a plain cotton quilting fabric for the back piece. So you'll need two back pieces. I'm going to cut one of this and one of this color. If you do have a stripe on a fabric or a grain like this corduroy fabric, you want to make sure that it's straight, obviously. Come to the edge of the fabric because this print goes all the way to the edge. Set those aside and let's cut out the pocket. And you'll only need one. So before you take the pattern off the fabric, mark where the darts are. Now this is a dark piece of fabric, so my black marker I wouldn't be able to see that. So what I love about this set is it comes with a white, red, black, and blue. So I'm going to use the white on this black fabric. Now there's a couple ways that you can finish the pocket off. You can bind it with your contrasting fabric, or you can just hem it by doing a rolled hem, folding it under 1/4 of an inch and then folding it under another 1/4 inch and top stitching. And you can do that. It's just your choice. If you are going to use a binding on the top of your pocket, you need to cut off 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of your pocket piece. So while we're cutting things out, I'm going to go ahead and cut out my trim. If you're making the binding for the top of your pocket, you'll need to cut a strip that's 1.5 inches by 29 inches. For the apron ties, you'll cut out a piece of fabric 3 inches by 88 inches. Now most fabrics aren't 88 inches wide, so you're either going to have to sew 2 strips or maybe even 3 strips together to get that length that you want. If you're making a quick release, you'll only need 3 inches by 56 inches. So this particular fabric, you really can't tell the front and the back, but if it was a piece of fabric that I could tell, I'm going to place the right side of the fabric to the wrong side of the pocket at the top and pin it in place. And you may have just a little on the excess, and that's just fine. We'll cut that off when we're finished sewing. I'm just using a 3/8 inseam allowance, which is the edge of my presser foot, and a straight stitch, back stitching at the beginning and the end of the seam. After you've sewn the trim, open up the seam, pressing the seam towards the binding. Then we're going to fold the trim under 1/4 of an inch and press. Then we'll just fold the trim over and just past the stitching that we already did and just pin it in place. And we'll just take it to the sewing machine and top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the fold. The next thing we're going to do is fold the darts. So these little lines that you marked before that look like this, we're going to take that outer or that line here and fold it on the line, and then fold the line until it meets up with that other line. There's just a little fold there. We'll take that marking, the next marking, fold it so the line is just on the fold, and then fold it so it meets up with the next line. So it makes these darts and pleats. So we'll go to this, just like indicated here, folding that line over to that line. Now, to make sure that they stay in place and makes it easier while we're putting this all together, I'm just going to take it to the sewing machine and use a basting stitch just along the edge there. So I've set my stitch to a longer stitch at about 4, and I'm just going to sew up about a 1/2 inch from the edge. You don't need to back stitch. And we'll be removing these stitches in just a bit. Take the back piece, place the pocket piece on top with both right sides facing up, line up the edges and the bottom, and just pin it in place. Make sure those bottom edges are lined up so that you're catching all the fabric. Grab your back piece, place it on top with the right side facing down, line up the edges, and we'll be pinning that in place. Now, if you want to add a little tag to the side seam of your apron, this is a good time to do it. So the tags that I use have a fold to them. So you'll just fold the tag in half, and the folded edge is going to be inserted on the inside with the cut edges of the tag just overhanging the cut edge of the fabric. And you'll want to allow for seam allowance. So measuring, like I'm using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, so where the edge of the fabric, you just want to find out where that's going to end up and place it where you want to. And then it's going to be sandwiched between that back piece and the pocket piece. And to hold that in place, I'm going to use clips instead of pins so it doesn't make marks in my tag. Making sure the edges are lining up. And then we'll be sewing down the side, the bottom, and the other side, and leave the top edge open. I'm using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching, of course, at the beginning and the end of the seam. When you get to the corner, leave the needle down, lift up your presser foot, and then just pivot and bring the presser foot back down and continue sewing. You might want to pause along the bottom edge just to realign things to make sure that everything's staying in place. Clip the corners and then clip off excess tag if you have it. Turn it inside out and poke out the corners using a turning stick. And then we're just going to press the edges really well and then top stitch it. Remove your basting stitch. I'm going to put a white bobbin in my machine so I don't see the black stitching on the back of this fabric. So I'm going to have black on top and white on the bottom. To measure the pocket stitching lines, take the apron and fold it in half and mark the halfway point with a pin. And then we're going to measure 3 inches from the center point out. Now I really like these heat erasable marking pens, but if you don't have them, you can use a strip of masking tape that really is nice for a stitching line, or you can just draw them on with a pen that is erasable. This will disappear when I press it. So I'm measuring 3 inches from that center point. And I'm going to do that on the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to measure 2 1/4 inches from the outside edge. Now you can take your ruler and just draw a line. You want to make sure that the fabric is laying flat. I kind of pleated that with the iron, but I want to make sure that it's flat so that we're getting an accurate line. And if you do want to use masking tape, you can just simply apply that tape along where that line needs to be, and then I like to put a pin on the side that I'm going to be stitching on, so you don't get confused and start stitching on this side. You'll stitch on this side. So I would just do that like so. And put a pin there. I love using masking tape with my sewing. On one of these short flat pockets, I like to just sew a line about 3/4 of the way down, so that if I want to put pencils in my pocket, that they don't get lost down in here, that it brings it up, that pocket up a little bit, so my pencil or my pen can stick out a little bit. And so I'm going to draw that stitching line. You want to pin that in place, and then we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and at the top of the pocket we're going to do a zigzag stitch down. You can go all the way down with a zigzag stitch and then turn it to a straight stitch and sew all the way down. This will just reinforce that pocket so it's not ripping. So those pocket seams right at the top of the seam, I'm going to do a zigzag stitch all the way down on the binding piece. And then once I'm off the binding, I'm going to change my stitch to a straight stitch and sew down. So I'm going to remove that tape so I'm not stitching over the tape right at the top. Remove the tape and clip your threads. Now if you use the erasable marking pen, you can just take your iron and press that. Those lines will disappear. Now we're ready to apply the ties. Now I'm going to show you how to make the tie with the quick release first, and then I'll show the instructions for the ties. Take the piece that you cut out for your ties, which was 56 inches. Now if you don't have a piece that big, you will say that you have an extra piece. You will put the right sides together, sew a 1/4 inch seam, and just open it up. And then you'll have the length that you need. So to join your seams, just make that 1/4 inch seam allowance and open it up. So take your apron and fold it over to the back side, and we'll be placing the right side of the tie to the apron. So as you can see, these top edges are not quite even. I'm going to cut that to make sure we have an even edge. For the edge that's going to hold a small portion of the buckle, I'm going to measure 5 inches from the end. I'm going to pin that in place. And then continue pinning it the rest of the way. And then I'm going to sew the 3/8 inch seam. Now just press the seam towards the tie, and then this extra on the end I'm going to press up the same seam allowance with just 3/8 inch and press. And then the top of the ties I'm going to fold over and press. Take that top edge and fold it over just past the stitching line and pin it in place. Line up these folded edges. And leave the ends open. We're going to start on this short end and top stitch just 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way down to the end. Okay, let's put the buckle on, the quick release buckle. I'm going to take it apart, and the side that doesn't have, it just has a single hole, that's the one that we want to put onto the short loop. So I'm going to thread that through. I'm going to fold the end under 1/4 of an inch and then just loop it over to the back side, and then I'm going to top stitch that in place. Now you can see how this is just a little bit wider than an inch, and that's okay, it gathers up. You could find, I'm sure, purchase one that's the same width as your strap, but this works just fine. And I'm going to make 2 passes, just 2 single line stitches. The first one on the outside, just at the edge of the fold. I'm just going to look at it to make sure that it's correct before I sew another row and have to unpick both. So bring your presser foot to the edge of that stitching line. Just sew another pass. And I'm just going up and back just to make it a little bit more secure. Now for the other end, so these quick releases have a little thing on an angle, so it makes it so it will slide but yet hold when you pull it. And the trick is to find the top so it's pointing away, and we're going to go to the furthest loop, the furthest hole, not this first one, this furthest hole, and insert the strap. Then I'm going to go back in to the second one. So you can slide it, but it will still hold tight. And we're just going to leave it like that, but we're going to finish this end of the strap so it doesn't fray and has a finished look. I'm going to fold that over 1/4 of an inch, tuck that end in, and then fold it so it makes a triangle, and these edges, these folded edges, are together, and this comes to a point like that, and then I'll top stitch. Leave your needle down, lift up your presser foot and pivot. There you have your, put that around your waist. I like the ties, but this quick release comes in real handy if you're wearing it all day. You can take it off real quick instead of having to tie things. So that's an option, and we'll go over just the regular ties now. I'm going to demonstrate on this apron how to apply just regular ties to your apron. So I have cut my long strip of fabric to 88 inches. If you don't have 88 inches, you're going to be piecing 2 pieces or maybe even 3 pieces together. I have done that here. This was a really long piece of fabric. I've only had to piece it in one place to get that 88 inches, and I've pressed the seam allowance open. Take the long strip and fold it in half and mark the halfway point with a pin. Then I'm going to fold the apron in half and mark the halfway point with a pin. Flip it over so the back side is showing. Place the right side of the tie to the back of the apron, lining up the halfway points. And then we're going to just sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance from here to here. Press the seam towards the binding, then flip it over, fold 3/8 of an inch down on the tie here and press. You're going to do that all the way down and pressing the bottom of the remaining tie up 3/8 of an inch as well. Fold that top edge down just past the stitching line and pin it in place. Now you can use a contrasting color if you want to, but on this particular pattern I opted out just to have it the same color. Start on the right tie and just a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 of an inch even from the edge, stitch down, sewing those ties together and then top stitching the waistband, continuing on down this other side. There you have your ties. You could do a second row of stitching if you wanted that look. So there you have it. I hope you enjoy sewing and wearing these aprons as much as I do. If you're new to sewing, would like some tips and tricks on just basic sewing skills, make sure you look into my sewing courses. Everything's in the link below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do that. Click on the bell so you can be notified when I put new videos up. Please comment in the comments below if you have concerns or questions. Give it a thumbs up if you like what you're seeing. Have a wonderful day, have fun sewing, and keep smiling. We'll see you next time.